December 20th, 1944, 2200 hours, Bastogne, Belgium. Brigadier General Anthony Clement McAuliffe, acting commander of the 101st Airborne Division, stands in a cramped basement command post, studying a map covered with red symbols. Red symbols represent German units. They form a complete circle around Bastogne. North, 2nd Panzer Division, Panzer Lehr Division. East, 26th Volksgrenadier Division. South, 5th Fallschirmjäger Division. West, Führerbegleitbrigade Brigade. Total German forces, approximately 45,000 soldiers, 600 tanks and assault guns, 500 artillery pieces. Total American forces inside Bastogne, 18,000 soldiers, mostly paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division, plus remnants of armored units that retreated into the town. No tanks, no air support, weather too bad for flying. Ammunition running critically low, artillery shells rationed to 10 per gun per day. Medical supplies nearly exhausted. The division's aid stations are overwhelmed with wounded and have no morphine, no plasma, no proper surgical equipment. Food supplies adequate for maybe 72 hours. And the temperature has dropped to 4 degrees, with wind chill reaching 20 to 20 degrees. McAuliffe's paratroopers, who jumped into Normandy in summer uniforms, are freezing. They're wearing every piece of clothing they can find, wrapping themselves in burlap sacks, stuffing newspaper inside their uniforms for insulation, and they're fighting the best divisions Germany has left on the Western Front. McAuliffe's operations officer, Lieutenant Colonel Harry Kinnard, looks at the map and asks, "Sir, what's our plan if the Germans attack from multiple directions simultaneously?" McAuliffe studies the map for another 30 seconds. Then he says, "We hold." "Sir, with all respect, they outnumber us better than 2 to 1. They have tanks, we don't. They have artillery support. We're rationing shells. They have supply lines. We're surrounded. If they coordinate a major assault, then we hold anyway," McAuliffe interrupts. "Because if Bastogne falls, the Germans reach Antwerp. If they reach Antwerp, they split the Allied armies. If they split the Allied armies, this war continues for another year. So we hold. No matter what." Kinnard nods. "How long do we need to hold, sir?" "Until Patton gets here. He's 50 miles south, moving his entire 3rd Army north to relieve us. ETA, 72 to 96 hours. Can we hold for 4 days?" McAuliffe looks at the map again, at the circle of red symbols, at the tiny American perimeter, at the roads converging on Bastogne like spokes on a wheel. "We'll find out," he says. Outside the command post, in frozen foxholes throughout Bastogne's perimeter, 18,000 paratroopers are asking themselves the same question. Can we hold for 4 days? Against 45,000 Germans, in 20-degree weather, with dwindling ammunition and no reinforcement. The answer will define the 101st Airborne Division's legacy and prove that American paratroopers don't surrender, even when surrounded, outnumbered, and freezing. Hitler's last gamble. To understand why 18,000 Americans are surrounded at Bastogne, we need to understand Hitler's desperate strategic situation in December 1904. By autumn 1904, Germany is losing on all fronts. Eastern Front, Soviet forces have liberated all Soviet territory and are advancing through Poland toward Germany. Western Front, American, British, and Canadian forces have liberated France and are approaching Germany's western border. Italy, Allied forces have broken through the Gothic Line and are advancing north. Strategic bombing. American and British bombers are destroying German industry, fuel production, and transportation networks. Germany is running out of time, resources, and options. Hitler understands that Germany cannot win a long war of attrition. So he plans a short war, a single massive offensive that will shatter Allied unity and force a negotiated peace. The plan? Operation Wacht am Rhein, Watch on the Rhine, later called the Battle of the Bulge by Allied forces. Objective: break through Allied lines in the Ardennes forest, advance 100 miles to Antwerp, capture the Allies' main supply port, and split the American and British armies. Forces: 3 German armies, 29 divisions including elite SS Panzer divisions, totaling 410,000 soldiers, 400 tanks, and 4,000 artillery pieces. Time Timing: launch on December 16, 1904, during winter weather that grounds Allied aircraft. Key terrain: Bastogne, a small Belgian town at the intersection of 7 roads. Whoever controls Bastogne controls the road network. Without Bastogne, German tanks must use narrow forest roads that slow advance to a crawl. With Bastogne, German tanks can advance on paved highways straight to Antwerp. Hitler orders his commanders, Bastogne must be taken immediately. The entire offensive depends on it. The Screaming Eagles arrive. December 16, 1944. The German offensive begins. 3 German armies, 250,000 soldiers, smash into American lines held by 6 divisions, 80,000 soldiers in the Ardennes forest. The American divisions are overwhelmed. Some units surrender, others retreat in disorder. Within 48 hours, German forces have penetrated 20 miles into American lines, creating a bulge in the front. At Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force, SHAEF, General Dwight Eisenhower immediately recognizes the crisis. German tanks are racing west toward critical objectives. American forces are retreating. The entire Allied position in Western Europe could collapse if the Germans reach Antwerp. Eisenhower needs mobile reserves to block the German advance. He has exactly 2 divisions in reserve, the 82nd Airborne Division and the 101st Airborne Division. Both divisions are resting in France after fighting in Operation Market Garden in Holland. Neither division is fully equipped. They left much of their heavy equipment in Holland, but they're trained, experienced, and mobile. On December 17th, Eisenhower orders both airborne divisions to the Ardennes immediately. The 101st Airborne Division, commanded by Major General Maxwell Taylor, currently in the United States on leave, is placed under temporary command of Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe, the division's artillery commander. McAuliffe receives his orders at 2000 hours on December 17th. Move 101st Airborne Division to Bastogne, Belgium. Hold the town and road junction. Deny German use of roads through Bastogne. Further orders to follow. The 101st has 0 preparation time. No reconnaissance of Bastogne. No intelligence about German forces. No coordination with other American units. Just go to Bastogne and hold it. The division loads onto trucks and begins moving north through the night. Private First Class John P. Cowboy Milka, a 20-year-old rifleman in Company E, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, rides in the back of a 2.5-ton truck through freezing rain. We didn't know where we were going or what we'd face when we got there, Milky recalled. We'd been in England resting after Holland. Suddenly, we're in trucks heading somewhere in Belgium. The officers told us, Germans have broken through. We're going to stop them. That's all we knew. The 101st Airborne arrives in Bastogne on December 19th, just hours before German forces encircle the town. As the paratroopers dismount from trucks and begin establishing defensive positions, refugees from surrounding villages stream into Bastogne, fleeing the German advance. The refugees bring news. German tanks are everywhere. German infantry is advancing rapidly. American units are retreating. McAuliffe establishes his command post in a Belgian army barracks basement. He divides Bastogne's perimeter into defensive sectors and assigns each sector to a regiment. North Sector, 502nd Parachute Infantry Regiment, Colonel Steve Chapuis. Northeast Sector, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, Colonel Robert Sink. East Sector, 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, Colonel Julian Ewell. South Sector, Team Cherry, remnants of 10th Armored Division. West Sector, 327th Glider Infantry Regiment, Colonel Joseph Harper. Total perimeter length, approximately 16 miles. Total defensive strength, 18,000 soldiers. Not enough to create a continuous defensive line. Instead, McAuliffe creates strong points, defensive positions at key terrain features, and road intersections, with gaps between positions covered by patrols and artillery fire. It's a risky defensive scheme. Strongpoint defense works only if defenders can hold their positions and artillery can fire quickly to support threatened sectors. If Germans break through a gap between strong points, they could roll up the entire defensive line. But McAuliffe has no choice. He doesn't have enough troops for a continuous defensive line. On December 20th, German forces complete encirclement of Bastogne. The 101st Airborne Division is officially surrounded. No road in or out. No resupply possible. No reinforcement possible. No escape possible. Just hold until relief arrives. 7 days of hell, December 21st, 1944, day 2 of the siege. Private Mielke crouches in a foxhole on the northeast perimeter, 3 miles from Bastogne's center. His foxhole is a rectangular hole in frozen ground, 4 feet deep, 6 feet long, 3 feet wide. He shares it with Private Donald Castona. The hole has no overhead cover, just a dirt berm around the rim for protection. The temperature is 10°. The ground is frozen so hard that digging is nearly impossible. Mielke's foxhole took 6 hours to dig, using a pickaxe to break frozen earth. Mielke wears wool undershirt, wool uniform shirt, field jacket, wool overcoat, scavenged from dead German soldier, 2 pairs of wool socks, 1 pair stolen from supply depot, combat boots, no insulation, leather stiff from cold, wool gloves, fingerless, can't operate rifle trigger with fingers covered, steel helmet, no liner, metal conducts cold directly to scalp. Despite all this clothing, Mielke is freezing. His feet are numb, early stage frostbite. His hands shake uncontrollably when exposed to air. His body burns calories trying to generate heat. But the division's food supply is limited to 2 meals per day, and those meals are cold because fires attract German artillery. The cold was worse than the Germans, Mielke recalled. You can shoot Germans. You can't shoot cold. It's always there, always draining your energy, always making you weaker. Guys would fall asleep in foxholes and not wake up. Frozen to death. We had to keep moving, keep active, just to stay alive. At 0600 hours, German artillery begins shelling the perimeter. Mielke hears the incoming rounds, a freight train sound that crescendos into ear-splitting explosions. The shelling lasts 20 minutes. Most shells impact 100 yards behind Mielke's position. The Germans are trying to hit Bastonia's center, not the perimeter foxholes. But some shells land close enough that Mielke and Castona are showered with frozen dirt and shell fragments. When the shelling stops, Mielke hears German voices. They're coming, Castona whispers. Mielke peers over his foxhole rim. Through morning fog, he sees shapes moving, German infantry advancing in squad formations, approximately 200 yards away. Behind the infantry, 2 Panzer IV tanks. Mielke's position is being attacked by approximately 100 German soldiers supported by armor. His defensive line consists of 20 paratroopers in foxholes spread across 400 yards. No tanks, no anti-tank guns in his sector. The division's anti-tank guns are concentrated at other threatened positions. Just infantry with rifles and a few bazookas. The WWII. German attack follows standard doctrine. Artillery, preparation to suppress defenders. Infantry advance in multiple waves. Tanks providing fire support and breakthrough capability. It should work. The attackers outnumber defenders 5-1 and have armor support, but the attackers don't understand who they're fighting. The 101st Airborne Division are paratroopers, elite infantry trained to operate behind enemy lines, surrounded, outnumbered, and out of supply. Being surrounded at Bastogne is exactly what they trained for. The German infantry reaches 100 yards from Mielke's position. The 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment commander, Colonel Robert Sink, has trained his men to hold fire until targets are close enough that missing is impossible. At 100 yards, Sink gives the order, fire. 20 M1 Garand rifles open fire simultaneously. The German assault line staggers, multiple casualties in the first volley. The paratroopers continue firing, semi-automatic M1 Garands allowing rapid aimed shots. Within 30 seconds, the German assault loses momentum as soldiers dive for cover. The Panzer IV tanks continue forward, trying to break through the defensive line by sheer momentum. Private James Martin, positioned in a foxhole 50 yards left of Mielke, stands up with a bazooka. The bazooka is a 2.36-inch rocket launcher, effective against tanks at ranges under 150 yards. Martin aims at the lead Panzer IV, now 80 yards away. He fires. The rocket launches with a characteristic whoosh and flame blast. It strikes the Panzer IV's frontal armor, but doesn't penetrate. The frontal armor is too thick. The Panzer IV's commander identifies Martin's position and traverses the 75mm gun toward him. Martin drops the bazooka and dives into his foxhole. The Panzer IV fires. The shell explodes 10 feet from Martin's position, killing him instantly. But Martin's sacrifice bought time. While the Panzer IV was engaging Martin, paratroopers flanked the tank's position. Private Eugene Rowe, a medic, has picked up a bazooka from a wounded soldier and maneuvered to the Panzer IV's side. Tank side armor is thinner than frontal armor, vulnerable to bazooka rockets. Rowe fires from 40 yards. The rocket penetrates the Panzer IV's side armor, detonating inside the crew compartment. The tank stops, smoke pouring from hatches. The crew bails out. 3 men, all wounded, hands raised in surrender. The 2nd Panzer Force, seeing the lead tank destroyed, reverses and withdraws. The German infantry, without tank support and facing accurate fire from entrenched paratroopers, also withdraws. The attack has failed. German casualties, approximately 25 killed, 40 wounded, 1 tank destroyed. American casualties, 4 killed, including Martin, 8 wounded. The perimeter holds. This pattern repeats throughout December 21st. German attacks at different sectors, all repulsed with heavy German casualties. By nightfall, McAuliffe's staff estimates the Germans have committed approximately 10,000 soldiers to attacks on Bastonia's perimeter. All attacks have failed, but the cost is mounting. American ammunition expenditure is unsustainable. Artillery shells nearly gone. American casualties are accumulating. The aid station is overwhelmed. American morale is holding, but soldiers are exhausted, cold, and wondering how long they can continue. Nuts. December 2nd, 1904, 11:30 hours. 4 German soldiers, 2 officers and 2 enlisted men, approach the American lines under a white flag. They carry a written message from the German commander. The message is delivered to McAuliffe's command post. McAuliffe reads it. To the USA, commander of the encircled town of Bastogne, the fortune of war is changing. This time, the USA forces in and near Bastogne have been encircled by strong German armored units. More German armored units have crossed the river Ourthe near Ourtheuville, have taken Marche, and reached Saint-Hubert by passing through Hompré-Cibré-Tillet. Liebermont is in German hands. There is only one possibility to save the encircled USA troops from total annihilation. That is the honorable surrender of the encircled town. In order to think it over, a term of 2 hours will be granted beginning with the presentation of this note. If this proposal should be rejected, 1 German artillery corps and 6 heavy AA battalions are ready to annihilate the USA troops in and near Bastogne. The order for firing will be given immediately after this 2 hours term. All the serious civilian losses caused by this artillery fire would not correspond with the well-known American humanity. The German commander, McAuliffe, finishes reading and looks at his staff. They want us to surrender, he says. His staff waits for his response. McAuliffe thinks for approximately 10 seconds. Then he says, "Aw, nuts." His staff laughs, the first laughter in days. Colonel Harry Kinnard says, "Sir, that's exactly the right response. You should send that." "Send what?" "Nuts," as your official reply. McAuliffe considers this. Will the Germans understand what nuts means? Probably not, sir, but we'll explain it to them. McAuliffe drafts the official American response. To the German commander, nuts, the American commander. The German officers who delivered the surrender demand are recalled to receive McAuliffe's response. They read the single-word reply with confusion. "What does nuts mean?" one German officer asks in broken English. Colonel Joseph Harper, commanding the 327th Glider Infantry Regiment and tasked with delivering McAuliffe's response, smiles. "It means, go to hell. We're not surrendering. You can tell your commander to take his surrender demand and shove it up his ass." The German officer understands the sentiment, if not the exact translation. "If you refuse to surrender, we will destroy you," the officer says. "You're welcome to try," Harper says. "We're ready. Are you?" The German officers leave. News of McAuliffe's one-word response spreads through the 101st Airborne Division within hours. Soldiers who were exhausted, cold, and wondering if surrender might be preferable to freezing to death suddenly have renewed determination. "The general told the Germans to go to hell," soldiers tell each other. "We're staying. We're fighting." Private Milka, back in his frozen foxhole on the northeast perimeter, hears about McAuliffe's response from his company commander. "What did the general say?" Milka asks. "He said nuts," the commander replies. "What's that mean?" "It means we're not surrendering. It means we're the 101st Airborne, and we don't quit. It means we hold this line until Patton gets here, or we all die trying." Milka nods. "Airborne? Sir, airborne, soldier." McAuliffe's response, later called the most memorable military quote of World War II, transforms the siege psychologically. Before the response, defending Bastogne felt like a desperate holding action against inevitable defeat. After the response, it becomes a matter of pride. The 101st Airborne Division isn't just holding Bastogne because they're ordered to. They're holding because surrendering isn't what Screaming Eagles do. Would you surrender to save your life, or hold a position on principle, even if it meant death? Tell me in the comments. The German commander, Lieutenant General Heinrich Freiherr von Luttwitz, is enraged by McAuliffe's response. He orders immediate all-out assault on Bastogne. Every available German unit, infantry, tanks, artillery, is committed to breaking the American perimeter. On December 23rd, the Germans launch coordinated attacks from 3 directions simultaneously. The Christmas battle, December 23rd, 1904, 800 hours. Weather finally clears. For the first time since December 16th, the skies are blue and visibility unlimited. This is catastrophic for German forces and providential for Americans. Within 1 hour of weather clearing, Allied aircraft fill the skies. C-47 cargo planes drop supplies by parachute, ammunition, medical supplies, food. P-47 Thunderbolt fighters strafe German positions and attack tanks. P-38 Lightning fighters provide air cover and ground attack. The air superiority that Americans have enjoyed throughout the war, but which was negated by bad weather for 7 days, returns with devastating effect. German tank columns attempting to approach Bastogne are spotted and bombed. German artillery positions are identified and strafed. German troop concentrations are attacked with rockets and machine gun fire. Private Mielke, watching from his foxhole, sees P-47s diving on German positions 400 yards ahead. "I'd never been so happy to see aircraft in my life," Mielke recalled. "For 7 days we'd been alone. No support, no resupply, just us against the Germans. Then the sky fills with our planes, and suddenly we're not alone anymore. The Germans are getting what they gave us." But the air support doesn't stop the German ground assault. At 1,000 hours, the 15th Panzergrenadier Division attacks Bastogne's western perimeter with 40 tanks and 2,000 infantry. At 1,200 hours, the 5th Fallschirmjäger Division attacks the southern perimeter with 1,500 infantry. At 1,400 hours, Panzerlehr Division attacks the northern perimeter with 30 tanks. All 3 attacks hit simultaneously, the coordinated assault that McAuliffe feared. The western sector nearly breaks. 40 German tanks penetrate the defensive line, reaching within 1 mile of Bastogne's center before being stopped by anti-tank guns and bazookas firing from point-blank range. 18 German tanks are destroyed in desperate close-range fighting. The remaining tanks withdraw after losing tank commanders to sniper fire. The southern sector holds, barely. German paratroopers, Fallschirmjäger, are elite troops, well-trained and aggressive. They close to within 50 yards of American foxholes before concentrated rifle and machine gun fire stops their advance. Hand-to-hand fighting occurs in several positions, paratroopers using knives, rifle butts, and entrenching tools when ammunition runs out. The fighting is brutal, personal, and without quarter. By nightfall on December 23rd, all German attacks have been repulsed, but the cost is severe. American casualties for the day, 250 killed, 500 wounded. Ammunition expenditure, all reserves exhausted, divisions operating on ammunition dropped by parachute that same day. Medical situation, aid stations overwhelmed, surgeons performing amputations without anesthesia because morphine is gone. Food situation, 1 meal per day, soldiers losing weight rapidly, and the temperature has dropped to 15 degrees. December 24th, Christmas Eve, is relatively quiet. Both sides are exhausted. German forces pause to reorganize and resupply. American forces use the pause to redistribute ammunition, evacuate wounded, and rest. That evening, Father Francis Sampson, Catholic chaplain of the 501st Parachute Infantry Regiment, conducts Christmas Eve Mass in a bombed-out church in Bastogne. 200 paratroopers attend. Father Sampson delivers a brief homily. "Tonight we celebrate the birth of Christ, but we celebrate in a town surrounded by enemies who want to kill us. We celebrate while freezing, hungry, and wounded. Some of you are wondering if you'll live to see tomorrow. I don't know if you will, but I know this. Christ was born into a world that wanted to kill him too. His parents fled into Egypt as refugees. He grew up under occupation. He died executed by an empire. So he understands what we're facing tonight. And I have to believe, that if we hold this town, if we refuse to surrender, if we keep faith with each other and with our mission, then we're doing Christ's work. Because we're defending people who can't defend themselves. We're standing against evil, and that's what Christmas is about, light in darkness. So hold your positions, keep faith, and know that whether we live or die, we're doing the right thing." The paratroopers file out of the church silently. Many are crying. They return to their frozen foxholes and wait for the next German attack. Patton's Relief, December 22, 1904, 50 miles south of Bastogne. General George S. Patton, commanding the U.S. Third Army, receives orders from Eisenhower, disengage from current operations, turn Third Army 90 degrees north, advance 50 miles through winter weather, and relieve Bastogne. Most military analysts say this is impossible. Turning an entire army, 250,000 soldiers, thousands of vehicles, 90 degrees requires weeks of planning and preparation. Patton says he will do it in 48 hours. His staff thinks he's insane, but Patton has already prepared contingency plans, anticipating that Eisenhower would order him north. Third Army begins moving on December 22nd. The 4th Armored Division, Patton's spearhead unit, leads the advance. Commanding the division, Major General Hugh Gaffey. Commanding the leading combat command, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, later Army Chief of Staff and namesake of M1 Abrams tank. Abrams' task: break through German lines, advance 50 miles through enemy territory, and reach Bastogne. Timeline: 72 hours. The advance is difficult. German forces have established defensive positions along every road leading to Bastogne. The weather is terrible: snow, ice, temperatures below zero. The roads are narrow and easily blocked. But Patton drives his army forward relentlessly. "Drive like hell," Patton orders. "If you stop, men die in Bastogne. If you're tired, the 101st is more tired. If the enemy resists, kill them and keep moving. Bastogne must be relieved before Christmas." Abrams' combat command fights through German positions, using tactics that prioritize speed over caution. Bypass strong German positions, rather than reducing them. Use artillery and airstrikes to suppress defenders while tanks race past. Accept casualties to maintain momentum. On December 24th, Abrams' lead tanks are 10 miles from Bastogne. German resistance stiffens. The Germans know that if Third Army reaches Bastogne, the siege is broken and the offensive fails. Abrams' tankers fight through roadblocks, minefields, and dug-in anti-tank guns. On December 26th, 10 days after the German offensive began, 7 days after Bastogne was surrounded, Abrams' lead tanks reach the 101st Airborne's perimeter. Lieutenant Colonel Abrams' tank stops at the 326th Airborne Engineer Battalion's position on the southern perimeter. The Engineer Battalion commander approaches the tank. "Who are you?" the engineer asks. "4th Armored," Abrams replies. "We're here to relieve you." The engineer smiles, a exhausted, relieved smile. "We're damn glad to see you." News of Third Army's arrival spreads through Bastogne within minutes. Soldiers who've been fighting for 7 days without rest, without adequate food, without hope of reinforcement, suddenly realize they've held. The siege is broken. Supplies begin flowing into Bastogne immediately. Ammunition, food, medical supplies, fuel. Wounded are evacuated. Fresh troops arrive to reinforce the battered 101st Airborne. And the German offensive, which depended on capturing Bastogne quickly, has failed. Aftermath and legacy. The Battle of Bastogne continued for several more weeks as Allied forces expanded the corridor to the town and pushed German forces back. But the critical period, December 26, 1904, when the 101st Airborne held alone, determined the battle's outcome. Final casualties: 101st Airborne Division, 482 killed, 2,149 wounded, 214 missing, most later found dead. Total, 345 casualties out of 18,000, 17.5% casualty rate. German forces, estimated 15,000 to 20,000 casualties, killed, wounded, captured. Approximately 100 tanks destroyed around Bastogne. Strategic objective not achieved. The siege of Bastogne became legendary for several reasons. 1. Against the odds defense. The 101st Airborne was outnumbered, surrounded, low on ammunition, and operating in brutal weather. Standard military doctrine says surrounded forces either break out or surrender. The 101st did neither. They held their ground and refused German surrender demands. 2. McAuliffe's nuts response. The one-word reply to German surrender terms became one of the most famous quotes of World War II. It demonstrated American defiance and boosted Allied morale worldwide. When newspapers reported McAuliffe's response, it was front-page news, proof that American forces were fighting aggressively despite German attacks. 3. Operational significance. Bastogne's road junction was critical to German offensive plans. By holding Bastogne, the 101st Airborne denied Germans the mobility they needed to reach Antwerp. This forced German armor onto narrow forest roads, slowing the offensive and allowing Allied forces to establish defensive lines. Military historians agree. If Bastogne had fallen on December 21st, or Skund, when Germans expected it to fall, the German offensive might have reached the Meuse River, potentially splitting Allied armies and prolonging the war. 4. Airborne identity. The 101st Airborne stand at Bastogne defined what it means to be a paratrooper. Paratroopers are trained to operate surrounded, outnumbered, and out of supply. Bastogne was the ultimate validation of that training. Modern U.S. Army airborne units study Bastogne as the defining example of airborne operations. The phrase, "We're surrounded, good, "Now we can attack in any direction," is attributed to an unnamed 101st Airborne officer at Bastogne and remains part of airborne culture. Bastogne also demonstrated the importance of junior leadership. When senior officers were wounded or killed, junior officers and NCOs took command and continued fighting. Private Mielke, whose squad leader was killed on December 23rd, assumed leadership and commanded his squad for the remainder of the battle, despite being a private. "Nobody asked if I was qualified," Mielke recalled. "Someone had to lead. I was there. So, I led. That's what airborne soldiers do." General McAuliffe received promotion to Major General and command of the entire 101st Airborne Division after General Taylor returned. He remained with the division through war's end, leading it through Germany. After the war, McAuliffe served in various command positions, retiring as a 4-star general in 1956. He died in 1975 at age 7. His obituary in the New York Times identified him simply as Anthony McAuliffe, who said, "Nuts." The 101st Airborne Division received a Presidential Unit Citation for Bastogne, one of the highest unit awards. The 101st Airborne Division received a Presidential Unit Citation for Bastogne, one of the highest unit awards in the U.S. military. The citation read, "The 101st Airborne Division, with attached units, is cited for extraordinary heroism and gallantry in defense of the key communications center of Bastogne, Belgium. Completely surrounded by superior enemy forces and faced with demands for surrender, this heroic force continued to function as a unit. These troops were called upon to meet the full brunt of an all-out attack launched by the enemy in an attempt to seize this vital road center. Essential supplies rapidly diminished and casualties mounted, yet the courage and determination of defenders remained unimpaired. The outstanding courage and resourcefulness, the extreme tenacity of purpose, the heroism and self-sacrifice displayed by this organization are in keeping with the highest traditions of the military service." Private Mielke survived Bastogne and continued fighting through Germany until war's end. He was wounded twice more, shrapnel wounds in March 1945 during crossing of the Rhine River. He returned to Wisconsin after the war, rarely speaking about Bastogne until the 1980s, when 101st Airborne Division reunions became regular events. "People ask why we didn't surrender," Mielke said in a 2001 interview. "The answer is simple. We're airborne. That's what we do. We don't surrender. McAuliffe didn't teach us that. We already knew it. He just put it into one word that made everyone remember." Father Francis Sampson, the chaplain who conducted Christmas Eve Mass, survived the war and remained Army chaplain until retirement in 1971. He returned to Bastogne multiple times, meeting with Belgian civilians who sheltered American wounded during the siege. "The people of Bastogne suffered as much as we did," Sampson said. "Their town was destroyed. Many civilians died from artillery fire, but they never asked us to leave or surrender. They shared what little food they had. They hid our wounded in their cellars. They were as much heroes of that siege as any soldier." The town of Bastogne erected several memorials to the 101st Airborne. Mardason Memorial, a star-shaped monument outside Bastogne listing the names of all American soldiers who fought in the Battle of the Bulge. Bastogne War Museum, opened in 2014, documenting the siege through artifacts, personal accounts, and immersive exhibits. McAuliffe Square, the main square in Bastogne, renamed in honor of General McAuliffe, featuring a monument with his "Nuts" response engraved. Sherman tank display, and an M4 Sherman tank from 4th Armored Division preserved in the town center, marking the point where relief forces entered Bastogne. Every December, Bastogne hosts commemorative ceremonies attended by Belgian civilians, American veterans while they lived, and military units from both nations. The ceremonies include torchlight procession through town streets, reenactors dressed as 101st Airborne Paratroopers and German soldiers, wreath laying at Mardason Memorial, reading of McAuliffe's "Nuts" response, moment of silence for all who died in the siege. The last surviving 101st Airborne veteran of Bastogne, Private Robert Izumi, died in 22 at age 99. With his death, there are no longer living witnesses to the siege, but the legacy survives. Tactical lessons. Military analysts have studied Bastogne extensively, identifying key factors in the American defense. Iter 1. Defensive terrain selection. McAuliffe positioned his forces on high ground around Bastogne, forcing German attacks uphill through open fields. This gave defenders clear fields of fire and made German advances costly. Modern military doctrine emphasizes terrain analysis based on lessons from Bastogne. 2. Decentralized command. McAuliffe gave sector commanders autonomy trained to respond to local situations without waiting for orders. This allowed rapid response to German attacks and prevented command paralysis when communications failed. Modern U.S. Army doctrine, Mission Command, is based partly on lessons from Bastogne about empowering junior leaders. 3. Combined arms integration. Despite lacking tanks, McAuliffe effectively coordinated infantry, artillery, and engineers to create mutually supporting defensive positions. When tanks attacked one sector, artillery shifted fire to support that sector, while other sectors provided flank security. This coordination multiplied the effectiveness of limited forces. 4. Morale and unit cohesion. The 101st Airborne's refusal to surrender wasn't just about orders, it was about unit identity. Paratroopers saw themselves as elite troops who didn't quit. McAuliffe's nuts response reinforced that identity and gave soldiers pride in their defense. Modern military training emphasizes unit cohesion and identity as combat multipliers based partly on Bastogne lessons. 5. Logistics under siege. Despite being surrounded, McAuliffe's staff maintained ammunition distribution, medical care, and food rationing through improvised supply networks. The ability to sustain operations under siege conditions prevented organizational collapse even when resources were scarce. 6. Air support integration. When weather cleared on December 23rd, the immediate availability of air support, supply drops, close air support, interdiction transformed the battle. The coordination between ground and air forces demonstrated the value of joint operations. Modern doctrine about air-ground integration evolved partly from Bastogne experiences. The Christmas that changed everything. For the soldiers who fought at Bastogne, Christmas 1904 became a defining moment. Not because of victory celebrations, there were none. Not because of gifts or special meals, there were none. But because they survived something they shouldn't have survived. Private Donald Castona, who shared a foxhole with Private Milky, wrote a letter home on December 27th, the day after relief arrived. "Dear Mom, we made it. I don't know how, but we made it. For 7 days we were surrounded. 7 days of cold that froze your face and hands. 7 days of Germans trying to kill us. 7 days of wondering if each minute would be our last." On Christmas Eve, Father Sampson said Mass in a bombed church. He said we were doing Christ's work by defending people who couldn't defend themselves. "I'm not very religious, Mom, but I believed him that night, because if we'd surrendered, the Germans would have taken Bastogne. And if they'd taken Bastogne, they might have won. And if they'd won, millions more would have died. So we held. Not because we're heroes, but because we're the 101st Airborne. And surrendering isn't what we do. I'll be home when this is over. I promise. Love, Don." Castona survived the war and returned to Pennsylvania. He worked as a steel worker for 40 years, raised 3 children, and lived until 2007. His daughter found the letter in his belongings after his death and donated it to the National WWII Museum. The letter is now displayed in the museum's Bastogne exhibit, a reminder that history isn't just about generals and strategies. It's about 19-year-olds in frozen foxholes, writing letters home, hoping to survive one more day. In your life, have you ever been part of a team that refused to quit despite impossible odds? Share your story in the comments. December 2026, 1904. 7 days in frozen foxholes. 7 days surrounded by enemies who demanded surrender. 7 days of answering that demand with one word: nuts. The 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne didn't win through superior firepower or numbers. They won through refusal. Refusal to quit. Refusal to surrender. Refusal to believe they could be defeated. That refusal cost 3,145 casualties, but it stopped Hitler's last offensive. It proved that American soldiers could match German elite troops in the worst conditions imaginable, and it created a legacy that defines airborne forces to this day. Surrounded? Good. Now we can attack in any direction. These stories of courage, sacrifice, and the power of saying no to impossible odds deserve to be remembered. Subscribe so they never fade into history. Next time, the massacre that changed the rules of war, and the moment American soldiers stopped taking SS prisoners.